Why I study Hegel. We can look at this in terms of motivation and impact. So why is Hegel important to me? Well, I find that in Hegel you come to terms with the deepest thoughts. Now, what does that mean in this case? I think that Hegel's thoughts are particularly deep because he is very sensitive to the way in which how one thinks and what one thinks is one and the same, such that form and content aren't divorced, as you would usually find in formal logic. At this level, what you think and how you think are one and the same. And this basis, this way of thinking, comes to form, I think, the most penetrating arguments. You have this thing called imminent critique in Hegel, where the best way to critique something is really just take the position of the other and just work within the resources and the claims that he or she or they make. So if there is an issue with that, you think, then that should become evident within itself. This isn't only very effective, but it's also exhausting, because you don't need to bring in anything external, so you avoid a whole bunch of fallacies, but you cut also to the chase really quickly. So Hegel applies this way of thinking not just to philosophy, theory, and ideas, but also to history, to what human beings end up doing in society and with each other, in families and civil society and in the state and so on. And what is really illuminating is the fact that Hegel's method, his approach of imminent critique, shows us why things go wrong. And I think that's really important when you're figuring out what the right thing to do is, or what the right idea is. You have to look back at, or you have to trace where things can go wrong and how they go wrong. And usually we find in Hegel that they go wrong precisely at the places where we think we got it right. Paradoxically, it's when we have, we believe we have figured out the perfect society, and we revolutionize things, and we establish a whole set of new values that elevate human spirit and brotherhood and justice and so on, and then we end up with the terror within the same decade. It's kind of extraordinary how our ways of not just thinking but of being can have these extremes. And these extremes is something that Hegel is really tuned into, what he calls negation. And that negation isn't something coming from the outside upon something, but is internally built into the something in question. And Hegel thinks this runs across the board. There isn't anywhere in reality you'll come across something that doesn't have negation within it. And this qualifies a whole bunch of candidates about, what could be kind of real things. Candidates such as a thing that's purely positive, a thing that, or an idea of reality that, well, what's real is just the thing that's real. It just has reality as a kind of some sort of positive substance. And that's what makes it real, is just it has this, it's there. And then we might add like it's physical or whatever, right? But for Hegel, what's really, really the key in understanding why something is real is because it's determinate. And it's determinate because it has also negation within it. It's this negation and reality going together that makes things determinate. They make things stand out, whether we're talking about being, squirrels, states, cooking, what have you. These are concepts that are alive in our world, and they make our world. And we continue to make new worlds, new ways of being, infinitely through them. So I think this is really important. The fact of showing how things go wrong and why, I think can't really be underestimated. It's really easy to think that we just need to figure out the solution and boom, that's it, we're done. With Hegel, it's like, well, you've just reached a new stage in a development. You'll still have negation built into it. And the best you can hope for is kind of to reach some sort of equilibrium in contradiction. Because things are going to butt up against one another, and it's never going to be the case that you can just reach a perfect tranquility. Things, even though they have negation within them, for the same reason also are driven towards a certain being. They are all becoming. So although that is kind of part of the motivation of why I study Hegel, one could go on and on and on and on talking about this, and I could probably say it 1,000 times better. But I want to now move on as to how Hegel has impacted my life. So, what is it about learning Hegel that has been valuable for me? And what has that taught me? So one of the first things that come to mind is like, I get this supreme tranquility. I have this eternal courage in learning and knowledge that rationality is in life, in the world, in me, and I have the power to unpack and unravel these things that are within me and outside of me. And I can do it freely, to my enjoyment. And this is kind of like the biggest picture I can imagine. What we call, the big picture. Think about, focus on the big picture. Well, philosophy and Hegel enable you or help you to really think about the biggest picture there is, the big context. And so it's not so much that it sort of undervalues everything else, but it puts everything else in perspective. And you get a better view of what really matters and why it matters. Yeah, money is important, but why? Yeah, career is important, but why? Is it as important as other things? And why are those important? Is there something that could be the most important thing? A lot of us, I think, have an intuitive sense of what is the good, and we are quite adept at figuring out and sorting out the things of importance, right? Usually family comes before work and so on and so forth, and this is all well and good, but why is it like that? And this is what Hegel gives us. He goes through what he thinks society is made up of. What are the sort of basic building blocks of society, of right and the legal system, of ethics, how all these things put together and structured, such that we can understand why family is important, but also why family isn't the most important thing. Or it cannot be solely the most important thing. There is also society outside of you, and there is, your professional life to think about. So all of these things Hegel shows hang together in interesting ways, in reasonable ways. They aren't just contingent, or they happen to be this way because of a bunch of contingencies in history. Hegel thinks there is there is a development in history, not because of history, there is some spirit that pushes history in a certain way. It's because we are continuously historical in our attitude. We are always casting back our minds at what has happened because we're so interested in what is to come. And for Hegel, these things kind of hang together in what he calls development, Entwicklung. So everything is developing. It's developing conceptually in a way that's rational and conceptual. That just means that it can be understood explicitly. So in addition to this, with Hegel, another impact it's had in my life is that Hegel has really been a gateway to philosophy. Because Hegel weaves in so many philosophers, he doesn't just dismiss them or argue against them and just leave them there. He thinks everybody contributes something to the great sort of development of the history of ideas, and everybody brings something to the table, and then just Hegel comes along and picks up the whole table. So in that way, Hegel really is like a gateway to philosophy and life. That is me. But let's turn to you. Why do you study Hegel?